Hello and welcome back to another episode of our draft series. Maybe the final one of the 2026 draft season. If it was yesterday, I would have said definitely the final one of our 2026 draft season, but we might actually have a supplemental draft this year with Brendan Sorsby. We don't have time to get into that tonight, but might have one more like bonus episode coming in a few weeks depending on the outcome there. Sounds like he will be in the supplemental draft, so might have one more person to add to this list. But Jon and I are here today just to do an overall recap of the class. We'll start just by like big picture takeaways. How do we view this class as a whole now that we've had the chance to evaluate it? And then get into, maybe where we differed from consensus, where we lined up with consensus, and then finish with team fits here. As you can see, we'll talk about the landing spots for a lot of these guys and the path to the field for them going forward. So Jon, thanks for joining today. Excited to get into this.
Yeah, looking forward to kind of closing out this class and getting on to the next one, really.
All right. I'll start with kind of one big picture takeaway, and we can just bounce back and forth until we run out of ideas here. First thing that comes to mind for me with this class as I look back at it, and even just, as you look at this graphic with our grades, the results from the draft, this draft has no depth to it whatsoever. It is like Mendoza, a huge gap, and then Nussmeier and Simpson, and then another big gap. And then you get to a ton of guys in the, I had 10 guys in the 5th through 7th round range this year, and then only 3 in the top 4 rounds. So just a lot of guys in this class that you can see as like late round flyers, but I'm not sure how many future starters are in this class. Like if you really pressed me and said like, how many guys start for more than like a season, I think I'd probably set the over under at like 3.5. Like the question basically is like, does one of the other guys outside the top 3 really ever play meaningful snaps? So yeah, it's just, I don't know. Like I think we felt that as we were going through, but looking at it big picture now, it's even more obvious.
Yeah, I think that was kind of expected coming in, was especially as things cleared up towards the end of the actual season last year. It was clear that Mendoza was number 1. Ty Simpson was up there. And then after that, people were kind of wondering where Nuss was going to be with his injury and LSU struggles. And then you had several guys who had really disappointed last year between Aller and Klubnik and Carson Beck. So like you had a clear couple of guys near the top, but then a lot of people had a lot of questions, a lot of the other prospects. So I think that kind of held true. And to your point, I think looking back on it, it really makes sense. Now that you've like sat down and watched all these guys, you see the clear flaws in most of their games. And I really agree. I think overall we're probably just going to get 2 to 3 starters from this class who, start for like a few years for their teams. I could see a realistic scenario where only Mendoza he's like the only guy that starts long term for his team.
Yeah.
I could definitely see that happening. So definitely not a lot of depth here. I thought that there were a few guys that had some interesting tools, but they also had some clear deficits in their game where they're going to need some development, and it's just rare that those guys ever turn into anything.
Agreed. I think the development call out is a good one, and that kind of brings me to another thing that was on my mind with this class. Like, I actually do think there are some like interesting later round developmental flyers in this class. Like to me, the whole group of like Aller, Peyton, and Green fall into that category for me of like, yeah, if I'm a team that doesn't feel great about my future at quarterback, which by the way, if you look at the teams that drafted those guys, like that is, the case for at least 2 of them. We'll see about Philly there
maybe
and like
Philly.
how they feel like they're a little different in how they approach the quarterback position to begin with. But those teams, I think, maybe Aller was probably a little rich for my taste, but like I understand why they targeted a guy like that, because you might as well take a flyer on a guy that you think has legitimate upside compared to another backup. Like they've got enough backups. They're probably starting a backup at this point. Like they're set there. So trying to find a guy with some upside, especially for a team like the Steelers, where they may never be top half of the first round or like in a real position to draft a top quarterback. I think it makes sense for them. Like the Browns are a little different with Green. They should have enough capital where they can target a quarterback at some point going forward in the next couple of years. But I still think a flyer like that makes sense where they're at. And who knows? We were talking before, he may not even play quarterback.
Yeah, and this is going to get into some of the like specifics of each one, but especially for a guy like Aller, it's like, he's not playing this year. You have your answer for this year, so like you really have some time to just let him develop. He probably still has some stuff to work on mechanically there. Like and Peyton's the same way. Like he's going to take a little bit of time, but he's going to the Philly quarterback school. So like you had a few guys in that range, and I think you could even go down potentially and talk about like like Pavia, how is he gonna like fit in and like develop as a backup quarterback for the Ravens, and Klubnik for the Jets is another that like I didn't really care for, but like they have a potential like, okay, let's bring this guy along and see how he's doing, and then maybe later in the year we give him a shot to see if he's learned enough to get on the field. So like there were some interesting guys in that range. I'm just not sure that any of them are actually going to be able to put it together to consistently see the field.
Agreed. Any other big picture takeaways from this class looking back?
No, I think that teams were really disappointed in this year. It had been billed as like a really good quarterback class a year ago. The season didn't go the way they thought it would. It ended up being disappointing. So I think that a lot of teams were just saying, okay, we're not going to heavily invest. We're just going to wait because 27 might be better. And, we'll see if that bears out again. If it ends up, if the class ends up disappointing again, we might be in a similar situation next year where a couple of guys go high, everybody else kind of slides, and, they're resetting again for 28. But I kind of think 27 may end up being better just because some of the guys from this year got pushed to next year, and it's rare to have a class that's billed as highly as this one that disappoints this much.
Yeah, and when you look at the results from this class, I can't help but look at the names that are down in the 7 to 12 range, where like Carson Beck is sitting there, Cade Klubnik is sitting there. Like that is the reason why. Like the guys that 2 years ago we thought would be first round picks just did not ever get there. And I actually think that there was some value at the later part of the draft on some of those smaller names that I think were like just as good in their last year of college football. I mean, for example, like I had better grades on Jalen Daniels and Athan Kelly-McManus from Rutgers than I did Klubnik, right? Like there's and Klubnik, just I think gets the higher price because he's a more well-known guy. He's been on teams' radar for a longer time.
Played in a bigger program.
Yeah. So I do think that if there was value in the late rounds in this draft, it was probably on some of the guys that were later breakouts or flew more under the radar. So yeah, that I do think that's something that from this class stands out to me. Any other big picture takeaways for you?
No, I think that's it.
All right. So yeah, overall, like definitely not the most interesting quarterback class that we have ever scouted. I'm excited to see Mendoza. I do think like guys I'm higher on than consensus, I think would probably be Nussmeier. I am definitely higher on consensus than Pavia, which I did not expect coming into it, but I definitely ended up there. I guess we'll get to the Ravens in general. Like I also think I liked Fagano probably a little more than the average person. I think that's probably it. Like Cole Payton, I was probably about at consensus on. Same with like Aller and Taylor Green. Guys I was lower than consensus on. Ty Simpson would be one of them for sure. And I think that was true for both of us.
Yeah.
Carson Beck, probably true for both of us.
Yeah, definitely.
And then
Klubnik, I think.
Yeah, Klubnik's a big one. I do feel like the draft community overall was like lower on him, but the NFL seemed to be a little bit higher on him.
Yeah.
I think everyone was kind of searching for QB4 in this class, and like somebody had to fit that spot.
Yeah.
Outside of that, a few other guys like I didn't really see it with like a Luke Altmaier, Sorry Robertson, like a few of those guys that other people had like draftable grades on. I was probably a little lower on than consensus, but overall, those are probably the big deviations there, I would say. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think the couple that I might have been a little higher on, maybe is a little higher on Peyton and Jalen Daniels.
Yeah.
And then, like, I think it's clear with them. It's just like, oh, there's just maybe a little more tools there than some of the other guys that I have a little lower. And that's where maybe I value that too high, but I think if you're looking in that later, when you're looking at day 3 guys, I'd rather take somebody toolsy. I'd rather take somebody who at least can run and push the ball downfield a little bit. I just think it's more interesting, and you have a better chance of finding someone who can actually be a starter.
All right, let's dive into some of those fits because I think that specific point kind of gets into a lot of the conversation, how we feel about these picks. So I feel like the easiest way to do this is probably just go in order of this list so we're not jumping around. So the way this list is in order is for my rankings. So like you'll see John's grades there too. He's, on some of them pretty similar. On some of them we might differ slightly where the order would be different for him. Obviously, here we are not going in order of the draft because Garrett Nussmeier will be the second quarterback we talk about and was picked like at the end of the 7th round. But I think this will be like an interesting way to talk about it. So let's start with Mendoza. I honestly think we don't need to spend much time on this because we already talked about it. Like we knew this was happening before the draft. So I'll keep my remarks brief here. But overall, I think this makes a lot of sense for the Raiders. Like I viewed him as a guy that was worthy of the number 1 pick in any draft, and especially in a draft like this where there just was no other quarterback talent available. They obviously had a huge need at the position, and I do think they're set up in a spot where I don't think he'll jump in and have a ton of success year 1. I don't think their roster's at that point, but you have a talented play caller who's joining him in his first year. I think that's a big deal, and a lot of the mistakes that teams make are hitching a quarterback to an existing play caller that's mediocre at best, and then you have to reset everything a few years in. So I like the idea of Kubiak coming in with a fresh start. I think Mendoza will be a guy that can help reset the culture there in Vegas. To me, this is like, there's almost not that much to say about it because I am pretty confident this will work. He may not be a top 5 quarterback in the league, but I think this was a no-brainer for where Vegas was at.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think, like, you mentioned Kubiak coming in, and I think they're going to give him some time, give him a little bit of leash, which is probably good. But also, I think the Raiders' offense could, like, really turn around and be pretty good this year. They have a lot of weapons there. The offensive line was kind of a disaster last year, but if they can get the offensive line at least, like, somewhat functional this year, that Raiders' offense could be pretty interesting. You also bring in Cousins to kind of mentor and probably start the year, maybe for a couple of games until Mendoza's ready. Oh, maybe not. Mendoza might just start the season. It's kind of weird, kind of confusing, but either way, I think that gives you a little bit of cushion in case you want to extend and give him a little time to get ready to come in. I think he also is going to fit what Kubiak wants to do. They're probably going to have a really good run game. He's going to set some stuff up off of that strong run game, and I think Mendoza fits that really well, just like they did at Indiana.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's the offensive line thing is really interesting with them because they were probably the worst offensive line in the league last year, and part of that's because Pete Carroll hired his son to coach the offensive line, and he was just not qualified to do so.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things that, like, I do think they make more of a difference than you would expect. And like, that's one of the reasons why last year the Raiders went from like kind of a trendy playoff, like wild card team to like the worst team in the league. And if you can bake in the opposite of that this year with a new offensive line coach, I do think they'll probably get back to a pretty solid baseline. I'm not sure the offense has enough talent to actually be like a dynamic unit, but Bowers and Genty is a pretty fun duo. Like if they could actually get a few upgrades at wide receiver, like this could be a really fun offense. So I'm excited to see where this goes long term. All right, let's move to the next one, which was wild. So Garrett Nussmeier ends up going in the 7th round.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe this as it was happening.
I couldn't either.
This feels like a combination of, I think we viewed his character as a positive going into the draft, and I don't think the NFL did.
Yeah.
I think the injury stuff definitely lingered, although I'm honestly not sure that was the reason. I think the character stuff was the bigger issue here, because I think most of his concerns with like the side issues and like oblique stuff he had throwing seemed like, I think they feel good about that going into camp, being like I think he had a procedure to like clean some of that stuff up, or maybe there's like a cyst that was there that he got repaired. So like most of that should be in good shape now. John, why did he fall to the 7th round?
I think you're right. I think it really is the character concerns and some of the stuff about. Yeah, I just don't know if he carried himself well in interviews. Which,
Yeah.
I mean, when you're talking about a quarterback class where maybe only 1 or 2 guys are viewed as starters, and you are gonna be fighting for a backup spot, that's like one of the only things that really can't be missing. You know, you can't be a character concern and have a chance to latch on as a quarterback too. Nussmeier's supposed to be the coach's son. He's supposed to be the film junkie, like working hard. He's supposed to kind of bring everybody together, and you're not going to be that guy. And you're not like, I personally, I thought his arm is actually pretty good. You know, we talked about like his strengths as a passer. I think he has a lot of that stuff. But when you're not going to be like an elite talent and bring elite tools to the table, and you have character concerns, yeah, you're going to fall, especially on day 2 and day 3 of the draft. So, you know, I thought this was still probably too far. I thought the Chiefs were smart to pick him up because, you know, when you talk about Patrick Mahomes coming off the injury, apparently he is trending ahead of schedule. He probably will play at the beginning of the year, but you never know there. Justin Fields has never really shown anything as a quarterback, just as a pure quarterback, to instill you with a lot of confidence that, like, yeah, that's our guy, that's our backup, long-term, can spot start Patrick Mahomes. And I think Nussmeier could actually do that. The only problem is, like, how is he going to fit in the locker room? Like, are those character concerns real? They might be. Sometimes those things end up being nothing. But, you know, it clearly affected his draft stock enough.
Yeah, the Chiefs are notorious for taking risks on these types of guys. Like, that's how they drafted Travis Kelce. They've done that with multiple other players in their history. So, like, I think it makes sense for them. If Mahomes does play week 1, then, like, we may never see Nussmeier really ever get a chance. I do think if their goal is to kind of stick with their normal scheme, I don't think Fields is viable whatsoever. I do think Reed probably is able to adjust enough in like the RPO stuff that they run to accommodate a guy who's more of a scrambler. But if they're trying to stick with their system because they think like, hey, Mahomes is only going to miss 1 or 2 games, like we don't really want to have to put in a whole new offense in training camp for Fields and then revert back to what we normally run. I do think Nussmeier's a better fit for that. I think he would be better, flat out better in that system to start than Fields would be. Yeah. So if they need a guy for 1 or 2 weeks, I could see him getting a shot. My guess is the Chiefs defer to the veteran there anyways, just like out of respect for Fields. But he's got a chance. I think this is a good place for him just because you at least think that like this is probably a situation where, you know, maybe if 2 years from now, if the reports are better, if he's looked good in preseason, like somebody will give up a 4th round pick for him and they can, you know, potentially have him be in a quarterback battle or sit behind a guy for a year and then potentially take over as a starter somewhere else. So I think this makes sense as an asset play for the Chiefs. I mean, obviously Nussmeier's probably, what are the chances Nussmeier is like a full year starting quarterback for the Chiefs? Like, what Mahomes would have to suffer like a career-ending injury.
They just invested the most money ever in any quarterback in history. So like, Nussmeier is not going to be a long-term thing for the Chiefs. You make a good point about them kind of making an asset play that, you know, he could be something for somebody else in a couple of years that they trade him for.
The other thing I will call out is like when these guys drop to like the 5th, like once you get there, you can go anywhere, man. I mean, like these picks are also interchangeable at this point. Teams have like very specific needs that they are targeting. They're taking special teams guys. They're taking, there are, once you get down to this point, if a team has character concerns and they don't feel like you're, a mid-round prospect, like it's really easy for you to fall super far. We saw that with Shador last year. So, the seventh round feels like insane, but I mean, I think that's kind of the story. Like once you get past the third or so, like it's really easy to just slip if you really have these types of concerns.
Yeah, I mean, the draft, when you look at like hit rates and things like that, if you look past the fourth round, like fifth, sixth, and seventh round picks, teams don't usually put that much value on those. Like that's why those are the balancers and pick swaps. Those are like, we're flipping that for a veteran. Like
Yeah.
Teams don't really put that much value in those. So to your point, like if somebody's making it to the fifth round, teams clearly don't value them enough to like really invest in them, and they could go anywhere. I think he just as easily could have gone undrafted. And honestly, by the time we hit the seventh round and he had not been picked, I was surprised he didn't go undrafted.
Yeah.
That he actually did get drafted near the end there.
Just to be able to pick his landing spot and negotiate with multiple teams, like I think he might have preferred to have gone undrafted at this point, just to like
because he knows he's not starting long term for the Chiefs. But,
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to Simpson. I don't want to spend much time on this one because we talked about the Rams and their first round moves in our draft recap show. So like, go back and listen to that if you're curious for our really detailed thoughts on the Rams' outlook. Obviously, since then they have traded for Myles Garrett, so like throws an even bigger wrench into everything. Which even kind of further reinforces the idea that like they are kind of playing this as a two timelines thing. Like every other decision they make is oriented towards being all in for 2026, except for this one. Again, this is one of those where I feel like I talk myself in circles because I really don't hate the idea of drafting a guy in the middle of the first round when you feel like you're a really, really good team.
And you're never going to be there again.
If you feel like this guy's the quarterback of the future for you, it's just worth a mid-first round pick to do that, right? Like teams trade multiple firsts for franchise quarterbacks all the time. Like teams did that for Russell Wilson. They've done that for Deshaun Watson. Like they will take risks on guys and give up multiple first round picks to do so. So if you only have to use one mid-round one to get a guy you think's your franchise quarterback, even in the Rams situation, I think long-term that's the right call. The problem here is I just don't think Simpson's that kind of player. I've already stated that. So that's where I sit with the Rams decision. I honestly don't think the Garrett trade like moves me that far in one direction either way from like a process perspective. It's just, it further reinforces the idea that like, I think you might pay even more of a penalty for this than you did before because I just don't think Simpson's going to be great. And in future years now, when you've traded more young players, more assets for McDuffie, for Myles Garrett, like the cupboard could be bare in a couple years, and it's going to feel especially so if Simpson does not hit. So this is a fascinating one. I'm very curious to see how this unfolds. I think this could be like an Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love situation in a few years where it's like Stafford just keeps coming back and is still really good, and Simpson's sitting there like, hey, when am I ever going to get to play here? And it forces a really tough decision for them. But yeah, I don't hate the process. I don't like the evaluation.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you across the board. The more that I think about this with the Myles Garrett move, I think they really viewed it as house money. Like, okay, we've already used our real first round pick trading for a starting corner. And now with this extra first-round pick that, we shouldn't have had, but the Falcons are stupid, we're just going to go out and get a guy that, if Stafford is done in 2 years, then we could potentially keep contending after that. We can just turn the reins right over to Ty Simpson. He's ready to go. I think he is kind of a fit for some of the things they want to do schematically. I think that it might go kind of back to some of the Jared Goff concerns where like, okay, this is not an elite physical quarterback, so that when some of those things in structure break down, he's not going to make some of the plays that Stafford does. So they had that guy in Jared Goff, and they got rid of him. They didn't want him anymore. So I'm kind of interested to see like where that goes in a couple of years if he does see the field. How does that relationship with McVay play long term? But overall, don't hate the move. I wouldn't have taken him this high personally. I would have taken like Mekhi Lemon or someone who can help you this year. And then if you still wanted a quarterback that could potentially take over, like maybe look for them in the second or third round. I don't know if that guy's in this class, and that's probably why they just went ahead and took Simpson. But like, yeah, I don't know if anybody else was going to take Simpson this high.
Yeah, there's probably not that guy in this class. The one other thing I'll mention on Simpson that I do think is really interesting. I remember listening before the draft, or maybe around the draft, and people were saying, I think like McVay has a ton of respect for Brock Purdy, and like he thinks like that type of quarterback is like kind of almost the ideal fit for their system, the Shanahan McVay type system. My best case comp for Ty Simpson was Brock Purdy. So I think that's what he sees, is a guy that is physically talented enough and aggressive enough where my offense will be right enough where the warts will kind of just be hidden in his game, and you get all of the aggressiveness, all of the ability to extend plays, and very little of the downside. And so from that perspective, I do understand why he feels like this archetype is a good fit in his system. I think he's watched it in San Francisco for multiple years and said, I can make this work. So I completely understand why he targeted a player like Simpson, but I still just can't get behind the actual pick. So I don't know. It's a really interesting one, because I do think like if they had taken him in the early second round, even with a third round grade, I would have said like, yes, this makes complete sense. Like, this team fit wise, like I completely get it.
Yeah. Although another reason they might have wanted him as a first rounder is like, okay, he's not going to play 2 years. This way, if Stafford's done after 2, you at least have him for 3 on his rookie deal with the option year on the end. But like, if you take him second round, you're not getting that extra year. You only have 2 years to evaluate and extend him long term. That might be kind of tough, but I don't think they're actually thinking that far down the road. I think that's just
no. And even then, like, okay, trade out of 13, trade back to the end of the first round and take him.
Yeah.
Like if that's really if they had done that, it's like I get it. Yeah. Okay, let's get into a few of the high upside guys. I in my head I kind of bucket Aller, Peyton, and Green similarly as the guys that teams view as like potential long-term starter upside, but like it's going to take some time for them to get there. I think we talked about how these teams are the ones where it makes sense for them to do that, right? Like Pittsburgh, Philly, Cleveland are probably looking more towards the future at the quarterback position than they are the present. I think all these guys are interesting and have different traits that get me excited. I think the probability of them actually hitting that upside is low enough where I can't get behind like taking these guys super early. I do think the Steelers probably jumped the gun on Aller a little bit, but I do think in this range, like I like these team fits. I think Aller's a guy that like would be able to handle the cold weather. Of course, the North Dakota State guy goes to the Eagles. Like I do think that one's kind of funny. And then for the Browns, like sure, just take the guy with crazy athleticism, crazy upside, and see what happens. Like I like all of these fits. Not much to say other than like Aller probably got picked a round or two early.
Yeah, agreed. I wouldn't have taken him that high, but at the same time, I didn't talk Aller with you, so just like briefly, I find the conversation around Aller kind of funny because I feel like everything I heard about him was ultra negative. But then when I went and watched him, I was like, it's not like good, but there's something there.
There's some awesome throws on his tape.
There's some good stuff in there.
Yeah.
I didn't find it as negative as I thought people were talking about it. So again, 3 is probably a little rich, but like
I do think I will say like on that note, I think if you take his best 10 throws, they're probably as good as anybody in the class. Like there's some super high level stuff.
He's got a great arm and he's huge.
Yeah.
So
I think he got a ton of hate just because of like the Penn State just disaster this year, and like people felt like he was supposed to be a lot better than he was. His footwork, on the other hand, is like it's a disaster.
Yeah.
But
and I think you could say the same thing about Cole Payton, who's in this range too.
Which it was interesting. Like as soon as the Steelers got out of camp, there were these reports of like, they're basically like reteaching him how to play quarterback right now. It's like, well, that makes sense. Like, I think he kind of needs that. But
He probably does. And he's not playing this year because Aaron Rodgers is
yeah,
coming back for one last ride on into the sunset, and then we might do the same song and dance next off season, and he might be coming back in. I mean,
he said,
who really knows?
he did say this one's it.
He said that. He said that.
Well, yeah, we'll see. He is from he did learn under Brett Favre, so
exactly.
Yeah.
But
the Aller one, I do think like I hope he succeeds because like my high end comp for him was like Jameis Winston. It's like I would love to watch Jameis Winston play again in his prime. So like I do think Aller is like a fun, like if it hits as a late round guy, like he's going to play an entertaining brand of quarterback. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, and just to comment on this, I would much rather the Steelers do this in the third round with the home state guy than the first rounder on Kenny Pickett. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Much rather them do that. So,
yep. All right, let's move now into some of the kind of late round guys that we had that I view as more of like the backup types. I think the only guy that doesn't really fit in this bucket is probably like Jalen Daniels is probably a guy that fits more in that tier of like upside guys, but I think he's even less likely to work out than the other guys because his like game is just very collegey. Like it's just not a super translatable style, but you do see a lot of raw end athleticism. These other guys here, like Pavia, Beck, Fagano, Calic Manis, Klubnik, Morton, and then some of the UDFA guys that we probably won't hit on as much. These are all the guys where you're probably talking more about like, hey, we hope we found a steady backup here and a guy that we can depend on for a while. I'm going to start just by talking about the Ravens draft because I actually kind of loved what they did at the quarterback position. And then we can jump around to some of the other picks as well. We don't have to go into depth on every single one of these, but like pick out a few of the ones that you're most interested in. I was higher on Pavia than consensus. I just felt like the throwing on his tape is better than he got credit for. He's still very limited in that regard, but I do think this is a guy that, like, especially in the Ravens system with a running quarterback already being the focal point of the offense, like, I think this makes complete sense as a UDFA signing. I would not be shocked in a couple years if he is their backup quarterback. Just like would not stun me. I think he's overcome basically every hurdle that's been put in front of him to this point. It would be pretty fun if he was Lamar's backup. That is like a pretty entertaining quarterback room.
That really is.
I do think that this is also a really good landing spot for him because I don't know, maybe Pavia can convince himself of anything, but this is probably one of the only places where he will go in and be like, I'm actually not the best quarterback here. Like, I think there's some places, like if he got drafted to like I don't even know, like the Bucks, he might just go in and be like, I might be better than Baker Mayfield. Like I might be better than him. Lamar, it's just not gonna happen. So I really like the landing spot for him. And then they also circled back around and signed, both these were UDFA guys who like I had as draftable grades, which is obviously a plus, but Fagano I think is more of like the stable backup type. I thought he was one of the more complete later round prospects and a guy that like had a pretty impressive body of work at UConn. This is more of like your typical late round backup type that just doesn't have like overwhelming skills, but is a guy that like I wouldn't be shocked if Fagano sticks around for 7 or 8 years as a steady backup. So I like what the Ravens did a lot here. Like they got a guy that I think fits more of their scheme and like the type of quarterback they currently have, a guy that like they could get as a UDFA. And then also Fagano, a guy that like I actually would have expected to get drafted. Now that I watched his tape, like I would have predicted he would have got drafted going into the draft. To get him as a UDFA, I think is also a win. Odds are neither of these guys will ever do much, but I do like the process here for Baltimore.
I didn't watch either of these guys, other than watching Pavia just on broadcast this year, but I do kind of agree that this is a fun landing spot for him. I think he fits enough of what the Ravens want to do with Lamar that like when Lamar has his gas station sushi and is out for a game in the middle of the year, like you could put Pavia in and I think he could kind of just run the game plan. Like he's not going to do it at the same level, obviously. You know, Lamar he's a very unique talent in the NFL, but like Pavia can give you a little bit of something in there for like a spot start.
You mentioned like the run the game plan thing. That was something that impressed me about him.
Mm-hmm.
I thought like he kind of gets the rep as like the dumb, like says stupid stuff, and it's just like running around out there.
Off the
He
field,
had a really good
like,
feel for their offense. Like
yeah,
he knew what
yeah.
was going on. I think he's a really smart quarterback. So we'll see how that translates. Obviously, he's tiny. Like he's not the most talented thrower. So there's real limitations there. But I do think there are some things he really excels at as a quarterback. So we'll see.
Yeah.
All right. I think we have to talk about Beck.
Yeah.
Next, he went in the third round. I'll give you the floor on this one.
Beck.
Yeah. What were your thoughts on Beck to the Cardinals?
I just didn't love. I think he's had a long time in college to figure it out, to put things together. I don't think we really see him make many jumps from a couple of years ago. And I think that he has some real limitations. Even though he's a bigger guy, like he just doesn't have a great arm. And yeah, overall, I'm like, I get the Cardinals probably need somebody that they could view as a starter. This is just not the one I would have landed on. And for him to go at the beginning of the third round, like that is just way too rich for me. I think if this is more in the Klubnik range, I could maybe talk myself into it. Like, okay, in the fourth round, beginning of day 3, now we're kind of working into the reliable long-term starters from college that maybe they can give us something. But here in the third round, like, there were some real players left on the board that, like, could really come in and help your team this year, where you're probably still not expecting Beck to come in and start day 1. So I think this is just really bad process by the Cardinals. I would not have done this. I wouldn't have taken him fourth round personally. I still would have waited until like a true fifth round, late round, to take a guy like Beck with like limited tools. But yeah, I'm just not a fan of this one. And ultimately, like I think if he sees the field, I think he's going to struggle just based on what I actually watched.
I can't believe they came away in their first 3 rounds with a running back, Chase Besantis, and Carson Beck. Like that's awful. Like I just This is probably my least favorite draft this year. I do think like this draft more than any other this year reeks of ownership involvement. Like, let's take we have no stars, right? Marvin Harrison's a big name but hasn't had a ton of success. We have no stars. We just lost our quarterback. Let's take the running back that everyone loves. Let's no pun intended there. Let's take the quarterback who was in the national championship game that everybody knows who it is, who's been around for a few years. Obviously, I don't know for sure who was involved in this selection, but I also do think like they fit the billing of the teams we talked about earlier. The Browns, the Steelers, the teams that need a long-term answer at quarterback. Those other teams went upside hunting. They took the guy who is like maybe the most sure thing in the draft, which is like just average backup in my opinion. So yeah, I don't know. I think they're going to throw him out this year and it's going to be the Josh Rosen playbook. And then we're going to be turning right back around next year and drafting another quarterback first overall.
Yep. I fully expect that for them, especially with the weird contract standoff with Jacoby Brissett. Like, I don't know what's going on in the Cardinals front office right now. It's just
Well, Brissett's looking around like, well, I have no competition here. Like, they better pay me because they're gonna have to play this guy instead.
It's like he's really holding all the cards there. It's like they think, we drafted Beck, so you should be worried. And he's got the leverage.
Like, are you sure?
Y'all should pay him like a starter because you're gonna want him to start this year. I promise.
Yeah. All right, let's get into a few other late round guys. I don't want to spend much time on these guys here, but I think there's a few other guys that we were fans of, like Jalen Daniels getting signed by the Bucks as a UDFA. I think is fun. The Bucks are a team, like if you're a late round free agent guy, I think this would be one of the teams I would be trying to end up at because Mayfield is in the tier of quarterback who's like very clearly a defined starter now, but like in 2 years could be somewhere else and it wouldn't shock me. And then you do have a lot of young talent on the offensive line and in the wide receiver room. So I think this is a really fun landing spot for him. I hope we get to see him play at some point because he's one of my favorite guys to watch in this class. He's got a long way to go. So I do think, low expectations is good for him, but I think this is a good fit for Daniels.
Yeah, I mean, I just had fun watching him. Like he just seems like a great guy too, and it's kind of fun to come away from those kind of players thinking like, oh, that was fun that I watched, the stuff that I watched. I think that the Bucks are one of those teams where like they always feel like they're on the edge of the knife for me. Like they could very easily fall off this year and just be really bad. And Baker could be part of that, and that's where like a guy like Daniels could stand to benefit from that happening. Where if Baker implodes or the rest of the team implodes, and like you are looking for someone else to come in and play, Daniels might get some shots. He might get some real opportunities towards the end of the year. Not saying that will happen because the Bucks actually have been kind of in that stable, like pretty solid but not great territory. But it just they always feel precarious to me. So if they do fall off, that could end up being fun for Daniels.
All right, let's hit on Klubnik, and then
mm-hmm.
we'll move to like rapid fire. Any other quick names? I really don't have much to say here. I just don't think Klubnik was a good prospect. I think there's a ton of flaws on his tape. I at least get like, I think taking a mid-round quarterback for the Jets makes sense. They are one of the teams that will probably need a quarterback next year. But hey, let's take a shot on a guy, give him a chance. If it doesn't work, who cares? We'll turn right back around and take a guy next year. I think this is good process. I like it much more when you're the Saints and you take a guy who I actually think is good and not Cade Klubnik, but I understand it. But I just don't really see Klubnik having much more success. I think he can kind of be a chaos backup at times, but I don't see much more than that.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to find the answer with Klubnik. I don't hate that they're trying and that at least it's a day 3 pick. And they have plenty of ammo to come back next year and get the real quarterback. So, yeah, I don't hate this one. I still think this was too rich for Klubnik, but like overall, just from process, I can't fault it.
All right, I'll hit on the 2 other guys that got drafted really quick. So, Athan Kaliakmanis, who I did not watch before the draft, was not planning to watch, but then did get drafted, so I went back and watched him. I would compare him to like what I said in the podcast was like if Jared Goff was 6'3" and had a worse arm. That's like kind of what I think his upside is like wins from the pocket, good timing, good decision maker over the middle of the field, but a pretty limited guy and like somewhat inconsistent in college. Like he was nowhere near as polished as like Goff was coming out of Cal. But I think that's like the prototype you're looking at. Completely makes sense to me as a backup type for the Commanders. Like I had a 6th-round grade on him. Sure, get a backup that you think can provide stability. Makes complete sense to me. Baron Morton was an interesting one. I think he was kind of in the Drew Aller camp where like the season ended bad enough for him where everybody just thought like this guy stinks. Yeah. And he doesn't stink. Like he has, when I went back and watched him as well, the comp I had for him was actually like Zach Wilson, which is funny because Chris Sims likes Baron Morton. So I was like, I think there's some connections here. Like he also loved Zach Wilson.
Loved Zach Wilson, yeah.
He takes crazy deep drops. He's got a really good arm. He's a good, like, flexible, explosive athlete. I think he makes some really bad decisions. The injury concerns are pretty prevalent with him, so I couldn't get any higher than a 7th-round grade. But I do think it's a guy for the Patriots. Like, in a couple of years, he could be a pretty interesting backup, and he has, like, as good of an arm as you're going to find for a guy this late in the draft. So I get it for New England. Like, I think he makes sense for them as a late round guy and is an interesting flyer to take. But I don't think it's much more than that. All right. So I'll quickly run through the late round or the UDFAs. All of these guys that I had UDFA grades on did not get drafted. I think all of these guys are limited enough where I don't really see any of them ever like getting real playing time. I think Strand is probably the most interesting one just because he's coming from D2 and he does probably have the best arm of this group, but he's a statue and wasn't consistent enough, I don't think, at that level to have a ton of success. So not much to add on these guys. John, any final thoughts on any of the quarterbacks on this list before we wrap?
No. I mean, Hanks King is just a big, slow running back. Like he
put him in he's going to the Panthers. Bring the Cam Newton playbook back in the red zone. Just have him run straight at people. He was a fun watch.
that's kind of a funny size disparity between him and Bryce Young.
Yeah.
And it might actually work for him. And then Aguilar, who I did watch. I I mean,
I was kind of surprised he even got signed, to be honest with you. But I guess anybody gets a camp invite. So
yeah, thinking the same thing. I don't think there. I think there's a chance that he is their like practice squad third quarterback. I wouldn't guarantee that though. I just didn't think he was very good at all.
yeah. All right. That'll do it for this year's class recap. I'm crossing my fingers that in 2027 we are coming back with like 4 first-round prospects, and there's debate at the top of the draft that is like so much more fun. I think we didn't realize how spoiled we were the year that we had like the Stroud, Richardson, Bryce Young,
even
class.
Will Levis in there.
I think that class was like looking back like a very fun draft because there was real debate. There was no perfect prospect. There was real debate at the top. So I hope we get another one of those. But yeah, thanks for doing this throughout this season, and we will see about the Sorsby supplemental draft.
We'll see.
We might be back soon.
Next week or
but
so.
Yeah, thanks for doing this episode, John, and looking forward to continuing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me on to talk big picture of the whole class.
All right, that'll do it for this episode. Thanks to everyone for watching, and we will catch you all soon.